I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. And the way that the Ask Ken show works is really simple. You just type in your questions, and then what I do is I live channel the answers. That's right, I live channel the answers to basically any questions that you have that are spiritual. So I will channel them, I will answer them, and have tons of fun. If you are watching this, just leave a comment also where you're from, and this way I can give you a shout out. And this is called the Ask Ken Show. So, a couple things about my website, just real quick, is if you get a chance, please go to channelinginc.com. You can find out all my events, my spiritual events, like the Ask Ken Show is there, and the one for next month. So the Ask Ken Show is on the fourth Wednesday of every month, depending which time zone you're in. If you're in the Asian time zone, like Australia, Bali, places like that, it'll be on the fourth Thursday of the month. So it's kind of confusing. That's why I have to think about it. And then same thing with things like my Ascension Group Healing, which is phenomenal. That's where I do like dozens and dozens and dozens of healing in 1 hour, super hardcore, super intense, just straight up healing, because we all need that. And deep rooted stuff, things like childhood traumas, emotional traumas. Last time I did things on like your on relationships, which was a really big one. I did stuff on DNA, ancestral kind of stuff, ancestral healing, past life healing, Akashic Records healing. I could go on and on and on, different aspects of us that needed healing. So there's tons and tons of healings that happen on those. The second Wednesday, or again, depending what time zone you're in, second Thursday of every month. And I also do a whole bunch of spiritual upgrades, attunements, activations, and enhancements during those Ascension Group Healings too. So yeah, I have always lots of stuff going on. If you look at my website, channelinginc.com, you'll see all sorts of cool stuff. Plus, I teach people how to channel, and you're going to be seeing me doing a lot of that today. I'm going to be channeling, and I do these kind of events like the Ask Ken show because I want to show you that you can do this too. And that's what I do in my channeling training workshops. I empower you on how you can be able to channel at these higher levels and really enhance your channeling skills, whether you've never done it before, you have no idea even what channeling is or how to do it. Those courses are for you. Or if you're already a practitioner, a psychic, a medium, and you want to learn to tweak and hone and really make your channeling abilities like 1,000 times beyond what they are, those workshops are already there for you. So if you're just tuning in, please say hi and where you're from, and I'll give you a shout out. And welcome to the Ask Ken show. And if you have any questions, of course, just feel free to ask. Let's see. So one of the questions that came in is, how do I know when I'm channeling? It's a great question because I think this comes up a lot. People have these preconceived notions from Hollywood or maybe from the church or poltergeist. So I don't know, maybe these movies or whatever. Oh, hi, Shelly. Welcome, Shelly. Thank you for saying hi. Oh, yeah, and where you're from. So your name and where you're from. And so there's two different kinds of channeling, and one is called trance channeling. And there's nothing wrong with trance channeling. Basically, what trance channeling means is that you allow so your soul, which resides right here, your soul resides kind of right in that sternum area. Your soul will leave your body, and then another soul will come in. And then that soul will literally take over your body, speak through you, and do things through you. And then when that soul is done, it will leave your body, and then your soul will come back. It's called trance channeling. There's a lot of famous people who do it. Esther Hicks, she allows the collective of Abraham Hicks, to come in, and they'll speak through her, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's fine if I don't teach that. Instead, what I teach is I call it conscious channeling. And the reason why I like conscious channeling better, again, I'm not saying one is better or worse. This is just what I prefer, is because I always want to be conscious. If I ever want to back out, I just want to change my mind, I can just start channeling or stop channeling at my will. And there's nothing I need to do to stop or start it. It's just there and not there. So what I'm doing right now is conscious channeling. And so when people say to me, how do I know when I'm channeling? what they don't realize is oftentimes they are channeling, and they're channeling like quite frequently. So have you ever like, like you're with somebody and then all of a sudden this really cool idea comes to you and you pass that on to them, or you really cool message comes to you and you pass that on to them, and like, hey, that's really profound. How did you know that? And you're like, I don't know, it just came to me. Well, chances are that means you're channeling. So the real question though is, how do you know if what you're doing is channeling? Like, how do you know? I'll teach you that. And that's what I teach people. So the thing is, like, when you get to higher levels, you always know when you're channeling, when you're not channeling. And when you get to higher levels, you always know if it's you doing it, or like you, if it's coming from you, the information, or if it's coming from one of your spirit guides or one of their spirit guides or one of their loved ones or so on. So you can get really good at knowing, discerning the difference between whether it's coming from you or coming from your guides. Now, how many times I've taken people through exercises and I'm like, you're channeling. And they're like, what? That's channeling? I'm like, yeah, because they're getting really direct, specific information from their guides. And they're like, that's channeling? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that's what that was. And I'm like, yeah, you're channeling, you're doing it. They're like, oh, I had this idea that channeling was something different that I saw in like, Hollywood or these movies or whatever. And I'm like, no, no, no. What you're doing right now, that's channeling. You're like, oh, so this image that I'm seeing in my mind, that's coming from my guide. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, how do you know? I'm like, I'm verifying. And then check with your guide. And they're like, oh yeah, my guide is agreeing. Right. So then, and then also, they might be hearing their voice, their spirit guide's voice in their mind. They're like, oh, I thought that was my own voice. I go, no. How does your voice sound differently? Oh, my voice sounds like this. Right. So how does your spirit guide's voice sound? Oh, my spirit guide's voice sounds like this. Right. So that's how you know the difference, and then so on and so on. And I teach them this, and they're like, right at the beginning, it's subtle and these nuances, but then as you get better, that gap widens between like what's your stuff and what's your guides, and what's your stuff and what's your guides, and then you get really good at it, and you're like, oh, maybe I could channel like all the time. Really? How about like at the grocery store, or while I'm driving, or when I'm hanging out with friends, or maybe at work, and all these other environments. And you're like, it's so versatile. You can channel anywhere, anytime, any situation. Like, yeah, you can do this, and you can use it in all the areas of your life. Like, how cool is that? So that's how you know when you're channeling. You know when you're channeling when you could tell the difference between when it's coming from your spirit guides or when it's coming from you. So great question. Hi, Shelley, from Lethbridge, and Carla just mentioned where you're from. So if you're watching this, just mention your name and where you're from. I'll give you a shout out. And then I think Carla is from the Philippines, if I'm correct. So same time zone as me, which is really cool. Let's see here. Do we end up with the pets we end up with for a reason? So the answer is, the question is, do we always end up with the pets that we're meant to end up with? I would love to say the answer is yes. The answer is not yes. The answer is no. It can happen. We have free will. I remember this time we went to our cat had died, and we were ready for a new one. So my daughter, who I raised as a full-time single father, we were ready for another pet. So I said to her before I sat her down, and I said, okay, if we get a pet, you're going to be responsible for the pet, for the cat, and you're going to have to take care of her. You're going to have to take care of the cat litter and the feeding and the brushing and all that stuff. And so she's like, yeah, okay. And she was, kind of like a young teenager at the time, I think 11, 12, 13, something like that. And so we went down to the animal shelter. And what happened was, when we went into the animal shelter, she saw the very first cat that she saw. She's like, oh, that's the one. I'm like, okay, well, don't make your mind up yet. Let's just wait. And, there's hundreds of cats here. So we spent another hour or so at the animal. It's a big, massive one, hundreds and hundreds of cats in one section, hundreds and hundreds of dogs in another section. And afterward, she was like, no, I still want that very first one. I'm like, okay. And it felt right. And just as we were walking out, or as we were about to get the cat, we went back. There was another guy who, like, again, there's hundreds of cats there. And this one guy had that cat in her name is Tiggy, and had that cat and was about to go and get the cat and check it out. And we were like, just as we were about to do that, we're like, oh wait, that was the cat we were going to choose. And the guy felt bad because, like my daughter is like, kind of not really upset, but, and then he's like, oh, no, okay, if you want it, here you go. And it was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, which was really kind of him. So we ended up getting that cat. Oh yeah, Grace from Australia. So we ended up getting that cat, and it was really sweet. So that cat was definitely meant to be with us. And then afterward, many, many years later, so like 6 years later, my daughter ended up moving out, and my daughter was supposed to take the cat with her, but she wasn't able to in the circumstance she was moving into. So I ended up being with the cat, which was fine. It was great. But yeah, it was kind of like my daughter's cat until she moved out. Then it became my cat. And then anyways, but yeah, and that's the case. But we have free will, and we're not always, just because we go and get a pet or adopt a pet doesn't mean that's the pet that we're meant to be or have. So if you're watching the Ask Ken show, feel free to say hi, leave your name and your location, where you're from, so I can give you a shout out. And the way that this works is, if you have any questions about spirituality at all, please just leave a message, and I will see the message pop up on my end. And then I will answer the questions, and I will live channel the answers. Like, how cool is that? So we got Morgan Silas Donnelly, all the way from Victoria, British Columbia, I do believe, or Vancouver Island. My apologies. Vancouver Island, which is just off the coast of Vancouver, which is really cool. Thank you for tuning in, Morgan. And let's see what other questions are coming in right now. So can a spirit guide change the way that they present themselves, and why would they? This is a really important one. So the answer is yes. Okay, so one of the things that I do in my workshops is I do this on purpose, and it serves many reasons, many purposes, is I take my students through what I like a past life regression on this planet. So where they've lived many past lives on this planet. And then I also, or to show them that they've had many past lives on this planet. But then the next thing I also do is I take them through a past life regression on another planet. And the reason I do that is because I want them to also know that they've lived a past life on other planets as well, on a soul level, so that they know this, rather than just, because a lot of my students, they would come to me and they'd go, if I would ask them, 100 of my students who haven't taken my course yet, but they're, lined up, ready to take my course. If I was to ask 100 of them and say, do you believe in past lives? Do you believe in past lives? They'd be like, well, yeah, of course I believe in past lives. Or a lot of them would say, well, I think I do. Like, I don't really know much about it, but I'm pretty sure, like, I've heard about it. So yeah, I'm pretty sure past lives are a thing. And so what I do in standard practice is, in my channeling level 1 workshop, I take my students through past lives so that they can actually experience firsthand what it's like to have and experience a past life on this planet. And then they go, oh, so it is real. I really have had past lives. And then, just for the fun of it, but again, it serves a greater purpose later on, is I also have them experience a past life on another planet. And they go, oh my goodness, this is mind blowing. Like, I've lived not just past lives on this planet, but past lives on other planets. Like, it's real, it's true. Like, rather than just hypothetical, they actually get to experience it and have their soul take them through and relive it again, which is really wild. So the question though is, do our spirit guides change persona, like the way that they present themselves? So the question is, if you've lived many past lives, is it also possible that your spirit guides have lived many past lives? And the answer is yes. So, hi, Cindy from Kananaskis, which is just outside west of Calgary in the mountains, which I love the mountains. That's where I was living before I came out here to Bali, Indonesia, which is where I'm broadcasting from. So if you've lived many past lives and they've lived many past lives, then the real question is, how come they choose the persona when they become your spirit guide? How come they choose the persona that they're choosing? So, for example, you might have a tall middle-aged man from Eastern Europe, or I'm just making something up right now, but you know what I mean, right? And maybe the 1800s, and so on and so on. So why is this spirit guide, if he's lived many past lives, why is he choosing this persona? And there's a number of reasons for it. So first of all, pretty much all the time. So your spirit guides are members of your soul family. So you've known them for eons, and certain members of your soul family become your spirit guides. So why is he choosing this lifetime to present himself as? And the reason why is because most likely the two of you have had a past life together in that past lifetime. So on a soul level, you can subconsciously remember that past lifetime that the two of you had together. And then that makes the connection stronger. And it also helps him, or helps you and him, to know why he's your spirit guide in this lifetime, in this season of your life, why he's your spirit guide, and what capacity he's here to help and assist you in this season of your life. Does that make sense? So he's choosing a persona, like why he's lived many lifetimes as a male, as a female, different demographics, different, all sorts of different ways. But why is he choosing that one? That's the reason why. Now, sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes a spirit guide will present themselves as an alien form. And it's not because they're doing it, like I've had some of my students be like, oh, I have an alien as a guide. I'm so much better than everyone else. And like they get this superiority complex or something. Like because they have an alien as a spirit guide, they're somewhat better. No. Don't think of it that way. So if possible, your spirit guides will purposely try to choose a humanoid form. Because why? Because you're humanoid in this lifetime, so it's easier for you to relate. However, sometimes your spirit guides have never incarnated with you on this planet, but they have incarnated with you on another planet, and you've incarnated with them on that planet, so they will present themselves as that alien form instead. But there's still a soul is a soul is a soul is a soul, and they're still here to help you in a very specific way, in a very profound way, as a spirit guide, whether they're presenting themselves as alien form or humanoid form. So don't get all caught up in it. And we have spirit guides for a season of our life. So when that season's done, that guide might step back and a new guide might step forward. So that alien guide might not be your guide anymore. And then you get another one who is a humanoid form, presents themselves as humanoid. But that doesn't mean you're less than now, or better than, or worse than. Okay. So don't get all caught up on that, whether or not you have an alien as a spirit guide or not. A soul is a soul. And another thing on spirit guides is, your spirit guides are members of your soul family. So a lot of people, they have these other kind of deities and gods that they like to worship and they like to pray to for help and assistance and all that. And for the most part, these other deities, these gods, these other ascended masters that these people are praying to are not your spirit guides. So they don't actually know why, like your spirit guides, they are the ones that, in my opinion, you should be going to all the time, because they're members of your soul family. They know why you've chosen to incarnate. They know what you're meant to get out of this lifetime, how you're meant to grow and evolve. They've known you for eons. They're members of your soul family, and you have that really close, intimate connection with them that you don't have with these ascended masters or these other deities and these other gods that people like to worship. So whoever your spirit guides are right now in this season of your life are exactly who you're meant to have, and can help you the most to really help you accelerate your growth and your and your evolution. And don't get me wrong, if for once in a while, like for me, I pretty much never channel those other kinds of deities or gods or ascended masters, not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just because there's no real reason for me to, but sometimes I do just for fun. I'll just connect with them and say, hey, Jesus, how's it going? Just want to say hi. And I've channeled Jesus lots, and Mother Mary or whoever. And, the Buddhas and the Jesuses and the Tolsts and the Shivas and all that. I like to channel them just to connect, and they're amazing energy. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're just phenomenal. I'm just like, whoa, like, this is cool. And, being here in Bali, I do these like water temple cleansing ceremonies, and they'll have like 9 statues, and each one is coming out like pour a stream of cleansing water, healing water, whatever it might be. And before I do each one, I'll tune into the god or the deity, and I'll be like, "Ooh, this one's cool." And then I'll go under the water, and then the next one I'll be like, "Ooh, this one's totally different." And I'll do that for each one, and you'd be surprised. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Like, it's just amazing experience when you really tune into these things, and again, you do it safely. Work with your guides to know who to tune into and who not to. And I always do that. And in here, in that example, all those 9 different ones was fine, and totally different. Like, when I tuned into each one, I thought it was just going to be all cleansing, but quite a few of them were. But some of them were more like, helped me with grief. Another one like was uplifting and building up. And another one was like, it was so different from each other. And as amazing as all those gods were, or whatever they were, those deities and souls that I was channeling, they're still not my spirit guides. So I always go back to my spirit guides as the ones who are going to give me guidance in my day-to-day life activities. Like, what is my next steps in my business? Anything to do with relationships, I have my spirit guides help me with that. Anything to do with my purpose and my reason for being here, that's my spirit guides' job. That's what they help me with. So that's what I focus on with them. All right, so we have a question coming in from Cindy, and Cindy's asking the question: when I ask what spirit guide is around that smells like smoke, I don't hear anything, but just had an aunt pass away, likely her, but why can't I identify it? Yep, it is your aunt. Okay. So, Cindy, great question. It is your aunt. Yeah, so she's trying to communicate to you through what's called clairaudience. So we have all these different clairs. There's 6 clairs in general. Some people want to say there's like, a whole bunch of other ones. Let's just break it down to 6. So there's like your clairvoyant, clear seeing in your mind's eye, clairaudient, you can hear their voice, clairalience, which is smelling, which is what you were smelling smoke. And then clairgustance, tasting, clairsentient, like sensing and emotions. And then there's claircognizant, which is the clear knowing. So as we get better as channelers, and there's a whole bunch of exercises I take my students through on how to enhance all their clairs, not just 1 or 2 of them. This way, whenever a soul, whether it's your loved one, someone else's spirit guide, your own spirit guide, or your own loved one, whenever one of those souls come in and they want to communicate with you, somebody who is a well-versed, versatile channeler can just say, okay, whatever one of these clairs you want to communicate to me, I'm welcome to any and all of them. And they've practiced and worked on enhancing all their clairs and upgrading, and not upgrading, but being like really good channelers in all their clairs so that they can receive messages in all the different ways. And so, yeah, lots of clairs. So that's what you want to do, is you want to practice on your weaker clairs on purpose. And in this case, she's trying to communicate to you through clairaudient audio. So she's trying to speak to you in your mind. And that one can be a little bit tricky because we hear, have you ever and anyone watching this, you can do this right now. So have you ever listened to your voice when you're talking to yourself, and you listen to the tone of your voice, the demeanor of your voice, the kind of the inflection, intonation of your voice, the way that your voice sounds? Does it sound like really aggressive? Does it sound whiny? Does it sound like very sporadic or jittery, all over the place? Oftentimes that's the case, but when we hear either our spirit guides or a loved one or something like that, it's usually a lot completely different. The voice that when we hear their voice, we might hear, like in my case, I hear more of a masculine voice when it's my own. But if it was like Cindy's aunt, I would hear more like a feminine voice in my mind. Her voice is a bit more. Has more inflection, like a lot more inflection, less monotone and inflection. She speaks fairly quickly, but not as quick as mine. My thoughts are a lot faster, so things like that. And then you start to discern the difference between their voice and your own voice. And then over time, you can discern the difference. The gap will widen, and then you could definitely tell the difference between what's coming from them and what's coming from you. So really great question. It does take practice. I'm not going to say it's easy. And there are times, especially when you have an emotional charge or an emotional attachment to it, that you can get yourself in the way. That's where having someone who's external, who's objective, who can channel, and they can sometimes help you with it or give you clearer messages and things like that. But it does take a little bit of practice, but have fun with it. It's a great question. So if you're watching this, this is the Ask Ken Show. Welcome, welcome. Also, please, if you get a chance, visit my website, channelinginc.com. If the way that the Ask Ken Show works is that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat box. And then what I'll do is I will live channel the answers right here, right now. And also, if you're watching, if you're just tuning in, please feel free to leave a message of where you're from so I can give you a shout out, your name and where you're from, and that would be great. Okay, so we have, let's see what other questions are coming in. Yeah, so Cindy said like ego sometimes gets in the way. In this case, it can not even, sometimes it is ego, don't get me wrong, it really is, it's like us. But sometimes it's not about that. It's about we have too much vested interest in the answer. Like, let's say, for example, one of my pet just died, and they're on the other side, and I'm like emotionally distraught, and I try to channel them in that state when I'm totally like emotionally distraught. It could be very difficult for me to know if I'm getting the answer for my pet or not, because I'm just in shambles. So that's different. That's not ego at all. That's just we're just emotionally distraught. That's all. So it could be a lot of times. You're right, though. More times than not, it is ego, especially if we're like, oh, I really like that cute boy and want to ask him out, and you're like, I really want, and you're just craving and clinging, and you really want that boy, and you want that guy, you want to ask him out, you really, right, and you're so hot for him and all this stuff, and you really want to go for him, and then and your guides are like, no, but then you check with your guides to see if you should ask him out, or if he's, maybe there's all these red flags, but you're just looking past that because he's cute and handsome, but and he's charming, but he's there's all these other red flags, but you're looking past that, and you're like, okay, trying to channel your guides, and you're like, should I ask him out? And your guides are like, no, but I think I'm getting a yes. Yeah, I'm getting a yes. I'm gonna ask him out. So then you ask him out, you start dating, and then 3 months later, you're like, why is my life in pieces? And why is this guy such an asshole? And all this stuff, and and it's like, oh my goodness, like your guides are trying to tell you no, and you're like, but it's hard even for me. Like there's times when so a little trick that I do in that case is what I do is I go, okay, I say I have a emotional vested interest in something. So a little trick, and if you're watching this, you can do this, is what I do is I take a deep breath, and I reset myself, and I start from scratch. And what I do is I ask myself this question, which is a very valuable question. If I had no emotional interest or vested interest in this situation, what would the answer be? What would the right answer be? Like, what would it really actually be? Not what I want it to be, not what I think it should be, but what would the answer really be? And then from this nice, calm, neutral, no emotional charge state place, what is the answer I'm getting? And more likely than not, in that case, you'll get a more clear answer. So really, really great question. Great point. All right. Let's see what else we got going on here for questions. Can a spirit guide change the way that they present themselves, and why would they? So yeah, I didn't quite answer that question fully. So that's a really good question. The question is, they have sometimes, but most of the time when a spirit guide chooses a persona to present themselves as, they'll keep that persona for the entire season that they're here to help and assist you. And the reason why is it just makes it easier on your end. And also the persona that they've chosen, again, let's say a middle-aged man in Europe or whatever, European middle-aged man, and that's the persona that he's choosing as your spirit guide. He's going to most likely keep that persona for the entire time while he's your spirit guide. The reason why is because they often don't want to confuse you, but they've done this before on purpose with some of my clients, because my clients, they have this like weird kind of sense in their mind that they think that their guide has to always be the same. And really, they're just a soul. They're an orb, right? They can choose whatever persona that they want. So sometimes these people's spirit guides, not that often, but once in a while, they'll be like, I'll be like doing a one-on-one channeling training session with them. And I'll be like, oh, your guide has just changed the way that they're presenting themselves. How they presenting themselves now? Oh, as a early 20-year-old female. I'll be like, yeah. And then, oh, they've just changed the way that they're presenting themselves now. How are they presenting themselves? Oh, they're now like a 70-year-old grandma. And I'm like, yeah. And then they've changed the way that they're presenting themselves now. How they're presenting themselves now? Oh, as like a 40-year-old male. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, why are they doing this? I'm not sure. I'm like, well, ask them. And they're like, oh, to show that they can? I'm like, yeah. So you don't get all hung up into thinking like there's spirit and soul form, like in spirit form, and they can choose whatever persona that they want. But most of the time they'll choose a persona that is one persona, and they'll stick to that persona. Another thing too, sometimes people have this really weird idea. Like I've had a person in my class one time be like, oh, well, all my male guides are on this side, my right side of my body, because that's the masculine. And all my female guides are always on the left side because they're always feminine, because that's my female side. I'm like, what? Like, where do you get this stuff from? Or they're like, oh, yeah, this guide always comes in and they're always on this side. I'm like, are you sure about that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? Because I'm checking. I already know the answer, right? And so your spirit guides, they're in spirit form. And they can move wherever they want. They don't need to be in always in one place. Now, don't get me wrong. Some spirit guides I've noticed for myself is true is they have sometimes a preferred side that they like to hang out on. So for example, when my deceased father, he was my spirit guide, he always liked to hang out in the upper corner, in the upper left-hand corner of the room. But that doesn't mean that he always had to be there, like in the upper, because a few months later, I was like, sitting, meditating. And this is in my early days, early 2000s, when I first started channeling and learning to channel. By the way, if you haven't heard, my dad, my deceased father, he died in 2001, and in 2004 he became my spirit guide. And then he taught me how to channel, so I could teach others how to channel. And in the early days of me learning how to channel, I would notice his presence in the upper left-hand corner of the room. But sometimes I'd notice he'd be like behind me, and I go, "Oh, hey, Dad." And so it's the same soul. He would just move spots, but his more preferred spot was there. But just don't get caught up on where your spirit guides are around you. They can purposely move wherever they want. They might have a preferred spot, but you'd be surprised, a lot of them don't. So yeah, little tip for you all. If you're watching the Ask Ken show right now, please feel free to leave your name and a message and where you're from. Just say hi so I can give you a shout out. And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions, and I will live channel the answers. So welcome to any people that are just tuning in. All right. Angela from Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. Welcome, Canada. Hi, Angela. Glad you can make it. And Karin Lisa from, where are you from again, Karin? Sorry, I don't want to mess it up and say the wrong place. So welcome, Karin and Angela. Thank you for tuning in. And again, if you have any questions about spirituality that you would like answered, feel free to just type in the message, type in the question, and I will live channel it. Okay, let's see what else we have for questions here. Yes, Spruce Grove, of course. So Spruce Grove is just west of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, in case you're wondering where Spruce Grove is. And Natalie Martin, hi Natalie, glad you could make it today. And Natalie, I think, is in BC somewhere. Sorry, my memory. So many people all over the world here, so it's hard to keep track of it, all of you. Okay, so why are some souls in the astral realm? So why are the souls in the astral realm? Why are some of them, even though they're fully crossed over in the astral realm, why are some still kind of mischievous? And they can be. So, grandma could come to you and she could be a little mischievous, and stuff like that. And, in the ideal world, all souls in the astral realm would act and behave properly and appropriately. And they do. They're not like doing anything really detrimental. So if you ever watch those ghost hunter kind of shows and, you have those souls, those ones that are like spooking people and knocking stuff off the shelves and slamming cupboards and, like things like that, those are lost souls. So there's three different realms. There's the astral realm, which is where you go when you die and you cross over. That's where your soul family resides and your spirit guides reside, all that stuff. There's the in-between realm, which is where these lost souls reside. And then there's the animal spirit realm. So if we just put the animal spirit realm aside for a moment, we have these two. So the ones that you see on like those ghost hunter shows, for the most part, those are the ones that are called lost souls. So those are the ones that are like haunting houses and spooking places. And some do it purposely and are really malevolent, like actually are doing it on purpose. But some are just lost and they don't know that they're dead and they haven't crossed over yet. And so I teach my students how to cross these lost souls over. That's in channeling level 2. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, you can take my channeling level 2 to learn that. You have to take level 1 first as the prerequisite. But anyways, so those ones and lost souls can vary. Some of them are benign and some of them are very detrimental, and can be very, very, very dangerous and hazardous. So I always tell my students, use caution, especially if you don't know what you're doing. I do suggest you get formal professional training on how to deal with those things before you go jumping into the fire, or because it can be very, very dangerous. And then because I want all my students to make sure that they're channeling safely and properly. Don't go looking for this stuff. But if it ever comes across you, I'll teach you how to deal with it so you can get rid of them, deal with them properly and appropriately, and then continue operating in the light. Hence the word light worker. I want you to keep working in the light. And that's really important. So the question though is these guys in the astral realm, why is it that once in a while they can be a little mischievous? So let's say, for example, sometimes in my channeling level 1, there's a really cool process that I developed to help my students be in a more conducive state to channeling, to help set themselves up for success. And one of the things that I do, one of the many things that I do to do this as a beginner channeler, is I have them ask all their spirit guides to temporarily step back so that they can feel what it feels like to have nobody around them for the first time in their life, and then sit in that spiritual silence and feel what that feels like, so they can feel the contrast or the difference between the two. But sometimes their spirit guides are like, no, I don't want to leave your side and all. And it's like an honoring thing. It's a revering thing. I get that. Like, I understand it. That's why they want to be around. But, so you have sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you have to be a bit more forceful with some guides. I like, okay, just step back temporarily. It's just temporary. It's not for good. It's not forever. It's just for a little bit, so I can get to experience the spiritual silence. So, yeah, it's kind of neat that way where, um, so yeah, in the ideal world, everybody in the astral realm would behave and everyone would cooperate. But just like humans that are incarnated, you have some that are a little bit mischievous, and a lot of them, they get along and they do the appropriate thing. But then every once in a while, you get somebody who's just like, yeah, I'm gonna do something different here and tease this person or kind of play with them and have a little fun. It is what it is. So I don't ask my like, don't take it too serious. Um, yeah. So Natalie Martin, it feels very empty when you're in spiritual silence. So some of my students, when they experience spiritual silence, so what spiritual silence, just to clarify what it is most of the time we always have spirit guides and other souls and other things around us, like, all the time. And we're not even aware of it. And so what I get my students to do is I get them to ask everything to step back. So they just have like complete avoid of everything. But that allows, and you're welcome to try this. If you're watching this, please do. I always encourage my students, like, rather than just this being a talk and just listening, actually try it. So, like, we can do it right now. Like, you can just sit there and just go, okay, so I'll do it with you. Let's all just do it together. So just close your eyes and then ask all your spirit guides to temporarily step far back. So go ahead and do this now. In your mind, just ask all your spirit guides to temporarily step far back. Okay. So I've asked my spirit guides to temporarily step far back as well. And now just sit in the spiritual silence. Like, so feel what's different now. Feel what's different inside you. Feel what's different around you in your vicinity. And notice the difference and just sit in it, in the spiritual silence. And what do you feel? Like, what do you feel? So some of my students, and whatever you feel is not good or bad, right or wrong. The two most common feedback that I get when my students sit in the spiritual silence is they either love it. They're like, oh, I can just sit in here and I feel so peaceful and all that kind of stuff. And then some students really don't like it at all. They feel really uncomfortable with it. And it's kind of like, you're used to always having your guides around you, but then when you don't, you're like, oh man, you feel like so alone, so empty. And what I want to encourage all of you to do is practice this and get used to it. Because when you really revel in this and you just sit in the spiritual silence, it's actually a really beautiful place to be. Like, I don't recommend you do this all the time where it's for long periods of time, but just for short bursts, just to feel that spiritual silence. It's actually really nurturing and really revitalizing and good for you. To sit in the spiritual silence from time to time and just feel what that feels like, and to be okay with it. Like, to, and if you want to even step it up and, like I said, revel in it, really be like, wow, this is super cool. The reason why I do this, though, the biggest reason why I do this is because when I first started teaching my students how to channel, like a long time ago, early 2000s, is that I noticed that what would happen is I'd be like, okay, like, they're trying to channel one guide, but there's all these other spirit guides and other souls around them. And so they might get information from that one guide pretty good, but then they're kind of getting mixed up where like all this, because they're still new and they're still learning, and so they're kind of getting mixed up about getting in like where the source is, and so I'm watching them channel, and I'm walking them through it, and I'm teaching them how to do it. And there's sometimes they pick up information from this guide or that guide or these other guides that are sort of, they're not doing anything wrong, they're just kind of lingering in the vicinity, in the area. So then that's when I developed this strategy on how to get my students into a more conducive state to channeling, is by getting them to ask all the spirit guides to step far back and then sit in the spiritual silence for a moment, so you know the contrast, you know the difference, and you know you are in spiritual silence. And then from this point, this area, now you can invite one spirit guide to come in. And then from there, you only have one and one only guide. That's it. And then you find out where they are physically around you. You lock in on them. That's your focal point. You hone in on them, increase your connection, and then you start channeling. And the reason why this works so much better for new students is because there's no one else there to inadvertently, by accidentally, you're not channeling your other guides by accidentally. You're just channeling the one and the one only. And then you get really good at channeling just one guide at a time. And then later on in my more advanced channeling workshops, I teach more advanced channeling techniques that's appropriate for those later levels. But for beginners, that's what I recommend. So if anyone's watching this and they want to practice what I just explained, and if you're watching the recording, just feel free to rewind back on the recording and listen to the steps that I just took you through. And it's a great way to really start practicing as a beginner, or if you're still trying to flesh this out of, channeling your spirit guides. So really, really, really great, great question on that. Yeah. So, and then another reason that some people don't like the spiritual silence is because, I don't know about you, but I just, back in the old days, in my early days, early 2000s, I felt really uncomfortable sitting in silence, because all that, turmoil, trauma, unhealed stuff, the suffering from my child, like all that, trauma and uncomfortable gunk would surface. So I always wanted noise around me, like physical, like radio, television, anything that would distract me from feeling my emotions, my uncomfortable emotions. So the same thing with sitting in spiritual silence. I'm like, oh, I don't want that. That's like, it allows me to feel too much of my own inner turmoil, right? But as you get healthier and you do your healing and clearing, then when you do sit in spiritual silence, you're like, oh, it actually feels really good. And so because you don't have all that stuff surfacing, all that gunk. Yeah. Hey, Debbie. We have Debbie tuning in from Alberta. Great to see you and hear you again. Thank you for tuning in. Anyone else watching, just go ahead and leave your name and where you're from, and I will give you a shout out. This is the Ask Ken Show. So if you have any questions, spiritual questions, just type out your spiritual questions in the chat box, and I will live channel the answers. Also, feel free to go to my channelinginc.com website for upcoming events. I always have new stuff happening and so much fun. Spirituality is meant to be fun is my slogan, and also empowering people through psychic development. Why? Because I want to empower you and teach you how to do this on your own and at very, very high levels. So hi, Kim. Kim is, I have no idea how to say your last name. I'm sure it's pretty easy to say once I say it 10 times. She is tuning in, I believe, from Buffalo, New York. So welcome. I'm glad you made it. Any questions you have, anyone, just feel free to type them in the chat box. And the next question coming in. Oh, Diane Matthews from Edmonton. Welcome, Diane. Yeah, Buffalo, New York. Okay, so let's see. So the question that came in from one of my students is, do ascended masters have souls? And the answer is yes. So I don't really like to say this because I don't want people to get like, what I'm trying to get my students to go away from is this whole hierarchy, this whole what's the word called? Worshiping, praising, idolizing. Please, please, please get away from that. Like, I had one of my students way back in the day. He took my channeling workshops, and he was all enthralled with me and my abilities and what I could do. And he messaged me or told me like 6 months later, he's like, Ken, guess what? I'm like, what? He's like, I put a picture of you up, with my altar with all the other gods that I worship every morning and all that. I'm like, you did what? He's like, yeah, I put your picture up. And he thought I would be all like happy and excited. I'm like, no, like, take it down, please. Do not worship me. Like, that's the last thing I want you to do. Like, no, I'm just a regular dude. If any of you ever meet me in person, give me a hug, say hello, let's go grab a coffee or tea, hang out, shoot the shit, I'm just a regular dude. I raised my daughter as a full-time single father. I, took her to the park. I took her to her karate. I coached her soccer team. Like, I'm just a regular person who loves channeling, loves spirituality, dedicated my life to teaching people how to channel. And the only difference between you and I is I just practice lots. If you practice as much as I, and with a little bit of mentorship, you could do what I can do and even greater. And that's what I want for all of you, to do with channeling. But I'm just a regular dude. And same thing, like, these ascended masters, they're souls. They're people like you and I. If you think of like throughout history, I don't know, the scientists say we've been on the planet for, I think it's like 400,000 years or something like that, but we've only had written word for a few thousand of those years. So there's been ascended masters souls who've incarnated throughout history many, many, many times and have never been documented. They incarnate, they grow up as a human, they do their amazing things, they live their amazing life, maybe in some small village somewhere, who knows, like on the planet, and then they die and nothing's ever written or documented about them. And then, but ascended masters don't actually incarnate as often as people might think. Like, there are right now, currently on Earth, like right now, there are ascended masters who are incarnated. There are. But a lot of times we'll never hear about them. We'll never hear about what they do and their great works or anything like that. But an ascended master, a lot of them never incarnate, or will never, or very rarely incarnate. In order to incarnate on this planet, you do need a soul. So ascended masters are souls. They do have souls, and they do reside in the astral realm. And most likely, the ascended masters that you know about or heard about throughout history have been written in the history books or the Bible, the Quran, or the other religious texts around the world. Most likely, they are not members of your soul family. And so they would most likely not be your spirit guides. You do have your spirit guides that are members of your soul family, and those are the ones that I do recommend that you channel and you get guidance for on a regular basis. But the answer is yes. Ascended masters do have souls, and in my channeling level 2 workshop, I teach people how to channel every possible soul out there. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of souls. So if you're watching this and you have a pen and paper and you want to write this down, the different kinds of souls out there, there's random souls, there's loved ones, there's members of your soul family, so soul family members, there is ascended master souls, and then there's spirit guides. And those are the 5 different kinds of souls. And then there's a whole different category, which we won't go into any more detail because I already went into it quite a bit today, is lost souls. And that they're a totally separate category because they reside in the in-between realm. Whereas these other 5 that I just mentioned, they reside in the astral realm. Okay? So that's the different kinds of souls. And ascended master is a soul is a soul is a soul. They are very highly evolved souls. Don't get me wrong. I revere them. I respect them, but I do not worship them at all. I do not worship them. But I do learn from them, and I think they're amazing and great, and the works that they do are wonderful and amazing. And my goal in this lifetime is just to become more enlightened, more ascended. You know, so, but if I do, great. If I don't, great. I have no attachment to it, but I just it just feels right, like the right thing to do. Okay. So really great question. So we have a question coming in my question is, I could channel it myself, but I'm getting in my own way. So frustrated. Here it is. I have been dating someone from my past long history and, um, and been apart for 9 years, like no word from him at all. Back in July, reappeared and now broken up again. It is very complex, so I'm wondering if this could be a twin flame. They say twin flames can be very toxic, but um, so drawn to him, it's ridiculous, even with the difficult situation. Yeah, so there's a theory out there that we only have one soulmate. Um, and I went through many, many years, probably about 6 to 8 years, thinking that we only had one soulmate. So when I met someone um, that I thought was my one and only. So if any of you are watching, have you ever been told that or heard that? Like, you have one, you have the one. There's the one out there, the one. So for years and years and years, I thought that was the case because that's what I was taught. So how would I'm like, oh yay. So when I found this girl in Edmonton, her and I started dating. I'm like, oh, she's the one, the one. Yay, I found the one. I was all excited. We moved in together. Things were kind of rough at the beginning, but I overlooked that because I'm like, she's the one, the one, the one. And there was all these red flags, but again, overlooked that as well. And then for the first like 2 years, it was like lots of fighting, lots of all that. But I'm like, no, I have to make it work because she's the one, she's the one. And then by the third year, it was so toxic. It was so bad for both of us. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to break up with her. I'm staying with her. We're going to make this work. I'm going to make it work. But by the fourth year, it was just brutal. So I had no choice. I had to break up with her. And then after that, I was devastated. Why? Because I thought I was doomed to be single the rest of my life because I ruined and didn't make it work with that the one. And when I say I was devastated, I mean I was really devastated. Like, I went into a depression, hadn't showered for months. I was in really rough shape. I was like crying myself to sleep every night. Like, it was bad because, I'm doomed to be single now the rest of my life. I screwed up the situation, my one and only chance. And so eventually what I did is I channeled my father, who was my spirit guide at that time. And many months later, and I said, Dad, is that true? Is there really only one potential soulmate? He's like, no, silly. There's lots of potential soulmates out there on the planet. They're all over the place in every part of the country or every part of the world. And I'm like, what? Really? He's like, yeah. And he's like, I'm like, oh, okay. So I cleaned, showered up, and got all started dating again, and then so if depending on what you want in a relationship, like if you just want to have fun or whatever, and that stuff doesn't matter, then just go date and have fun, right? But if you're looking for like a longer term, chances of things making it lasting longer term, I do recommend just dating potential soulmates. How do you know? You channel them, you ask your spirit guides, and again, trying to get yourself out of the way. I talked about that earlier. Take a deep breath, because again, there could be that emotional charge and the emotional like clingy and all that stuff. Oh, desire. Oh, I want her, I want him, right? But you take a deep breath, you get yourself out of the way, and ask your spirit guide, is this a potential soulmate? If that's what you want. If you want the other end of the spectrum, that's fine too, but depending on what you're wanting. So the question is, though, so I dated a girl in Edmonton, another one, a different one, and we knew we were meant to be together for just a short period of time. And so before we did anything, I sat her down on the bed and I said to her, okay, I know we're just meant to be together for a short period of time. And she's a channeler as well. So she's like, yeah, actually, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting the same thing. And so I'm like, okay, so why don't we'll date for a while, and then I don't know how long it'll be, but we'll know when that time is up. And so that's what we did. We dated and we had so much fun. Like, it was fun. We had so much fun in so many ways. We hung out on on White Ave and in Edmonton, and went to the different the pubs and locations. And I don't drink or anything, but it was just like dancing and having so much fun in so many different ways, and explored so many different experiences and all sorts of fun things, and did all new things together. And it was just a blast, and it was so healing, and it was so good for both of us. And then 3 months later, I'm like, we're done. She's like, yeah, you're right, we are. And I was like, thank you very much. Like, it was an honor, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And she's like, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. And we parted ways, but we're still friends and all that. But we just knew when that season was done, we're done. So sometimes people are just meant to be in our life for, like in that case, it was just meant to be for a moment, like a period in time, but we were upfront about it ahead of time. Sometimes too, that somebody could be a potential soulmate, but they have their stuff that they're working through. We have our stuff that we're working through. And for whatever reason, it's just not a match. It's not that person has too much stuff. We have too much stuff, and we're conflicting, and there's too many conflicts, and we're butting heads, and we just can't seem to be on the same page. And then to know when to just be like, okay, you know what? Maybe we just need to take a step back and go our separate ways, and knowing when the time's right for that. But at the same time, and I was just had a discussion with a client about this yesterday. I had 4 sessions yesterday, and one of the clients we were talking about where everyone just thinks that anytime things go rough in a relationship, to just call it quits and break up. It's just, that's the easy out, oh, I'm going through a little struggle, I'm going to break up. Just break up, just break up. That's what everyone tells them. Their friends tell them, and all that. And I'm like, most relationships can be salvaged. And what I do suggest, if you're having relationship challenges and you really do want to salvage it, like there's something that it's worth saving, you feel that there is I do recommend getting a professional marriage counselor or relationship counselor. And we're all 3 of you, like the 2 of you and the marriage counselor, all 3 of you work together to resolve those big conflicts, because a lot of them can be resolved, and a lot of relationships can be salvageable. So then there's also spiritual healing that can complement the marriage counseling. So there's a lot of things that I do in my work. So I'll do things like I'll clear Akashic records, so previous contracts, deals, and agreements. I'll clear past lives, any past lives that the 2 of you had that might be affecting the both of you in this lifetime. I won't, if that person, so let's say Natalie, you come to me, I'll just clear your end of the street. But if he wants healing, he has to come to me, because ethically, I'm not allowed to clear his side of the street unless he comes to me, but I will clear your part in it. And and then a whole bunch of other clearing and tethers, psychic links, other things. There's a whole gazillion other things I can clear, including childhood traumas on your end and all these other things on your end, or your end, so that the relationship has more of a fighting chance to be able to get healthier and do well and succeed and thrive. And that's what I want for all relationships, especially if you're meant to be with the person. But if you're not, sometimes you have to call it quits. And sometimes even if you are meant to be with them, sometimes it's just not going to work out in this lifetime, and to be okay with that too. So it's a very complex question, very multifaceted, and it's based on an individual basis. And what I do is I do Ascension Group Healings, and those are the second Wednesdays of every month, depending what time zone you're in. If you're in Asia, that would be the second Thursday of every month. For North Americans and Europeans, it would be the second Wednesday of every month. It's called the Ascension Group Healing, and you can see it on my website, channelinginc.com. And that's where I do just 1 hour of full out intensive healing on these kinds of things, like I just mentioned. And then, of course, if you book a one-on-one with me, I could tailor it more specifically to you. And they're both amazing and both phenomenal. So check that out. The Ascension Group Healing really is life transformative. This is the Ask Ken Show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to message me. I do make myself available to my students, my clients. And have a wonderful day, everyone. I want to say I love you, and May your soul be blessed with so much love and peace, and we will talk soon.